current sales manager at Klaviyo, co-founder of SDRs Anonymous, a sales coach, former outreach sales leader. It's Kaitlen Kelly. Did you used to be crap at sales?
Yes.
How crap are we talking?
If we had to give it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll be generous and give myself a...
Christ, cold calling your parents for role play.
I was doing everything I could to get better because these gentlemen that I was hired with were extremely great as well. At Outreach, I'm pretty fearless on the phone, so I've got my script memorized, we're good to go. They sent me to my first event in Vegas. There's so much prep work that I put into this, so I had a pretty bulletproof plan of who I was gonna target once I got there. I'm with my account executive that I'm paired with at that time. I walk up, my persona's there because I looked on his LinkedIn, I know what his picture looks like, and I go straight up to him, and literally, it was the weirdest thing. It was like I turned into a robot. I think it shocked the account executive because he had to stop me halfway through and was like, I'm so sorry. We're gonna just take a step away from here. And he had to pull me away from the prospect and was like, are you still breathing? What's going on here? So that is, a moment where I'm just like, that was incredibly embarrassing, Mark.
I wonder if somewhere else they sometimes tell the story, that great Kaitlen Kelly you see on LinkedIn, let me tell you about her first event. Imagine a sales rep is listening to this, going to join a business in a SaaS role. This is the Kaitlen Kelly blueprint for your first 6 months. Everything you need to do to get ahead. What does that blueprint look like?
Yeah, in my first 6 months, I'm going to...
Welcome to another episode of the I Used to Be Crap at Sales podcast. I'm your host, Mark Akers, co-founder and head of sales at My Sales Coach. And today I'm joined by a current sales manager at Klaviyo, co-founder of SDRs Anonymous, a sales coach, former outreach sales leader. It's Kaitlen Kelly. Kaitlen, big welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. What a great entry that you just gave me. So I really appreciate that, Mark. Lots of titles that you tacked on there.
It's all credit to you, Kaitlen. Going through your LinkedIn, there's loads of your work going on, which is why I know you're going to be a great guest today. Let's kick off with just a yes/no question. Kaitlen Kelly, did you used to be crap at sales?
Yes.
How crap are we talking?
I mean, if we had to give it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll be generous and give myself a 3 here. But I think sales is a funny thing if you think about it in hindsight. And I think we'll dive into kind of how I ended up here. But yeah, if I think back to the first couple of times, got some good memories.
Let's start there and how you ended up in sales, because obviously that was quite a career switch for you. Bring to life how you went from working in fashion to working as an SDR at Outreach. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I think growing up, I had my dream and all this stuff, but then early it switched over and I was like, I want to be a buyer within the fashion industry. So what I did is I worked backwards from the end goal to figure out, okay, how do I become a buyer at Nordstrom? Nordstrom is a designer store similar to a Selfridges based out of the US. And so they had a internship program, and the internship program actually started out on the sales floor there. At the time, it wasn't it's literally setting up stylist appointments, and then you're selling wardrobes and outfitting people, but you're based on commission solely. So I went throughout my education, kind of ticking off the boxes of how do I get myself to the buying office, which was my end goal. And so as I went through that, got into sales at Nordstrom through the internship program. And that kind of accelerated me through a series of leadership roles and then into the buying office as an analyst, which was kind of my end goal. And as I was in the buying office, I was probably in my mid-20s at the time. And I knew that in order for me to get to that buying role, it would probably be another 5 to 7 years, just given how slow career progression was happening. And I wasn't actually loving the role either. And so kind of looking around, trying to figure out is there people that I see here that I want to be in 5, 10 years? Is this really where I want to end up? So I was having one of those moments I think a lot of people probably had these at 25, 26 years old. And a couple of my friends that I had started out in this internship program at Nordstrom had actually made the switch over to Outreach. And Outreach is a Seattle headquartered company as well. Nordstrom is headquartered in Seattle too. So I had a good friend who had went there a year before I had kind of made the transition over to Outreach. And he went in as an SDR and was like loving it. He knew how ambitious I was and motivated. And so he kept trying. He's like, just give it a shot, give it a shot. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not cold calling. I was like sitting in my comfort zone. Like, I had just invested 4 years of my own money to pay for tuition and all of the years that I put into like getting myself on this career track. So I'm like, do I give up now? We're kind of 7 years into this, or do I wait it out for 5 years? So I was kind of in that weird spot. And yeah, I remember talking to my family about it. And I think there's also like some generational differences there. So I remember whereas like my dad owns his own company and he was very hesitant with me where he's like, you've had great progression at Nordstrom, like just wait it out. Like you don't want to just make the switch over to an SDR role. Like they've treated you so well. And I think that has a lot to do with like how his generation was, where they stay longer at these companies. And then I kind of just dug deep on like what I loved and like where I felt my strengths kind of aligned. And I was like, I'm going to bet on me. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to go and start as an SDR. I'm scared as hell to do it because all I could think about was the cold calling and then, being in a new environment, something I'm unfamiliar with. But that kind of curiosity, I think, outweighed the fear of failing. And so I was like, worst case scenario, I fail and I have to move back home and I figure it out from there. But if I don't try it and go for it, then I'd regret it. So that's how I ended up at Outreach and kind of giving it a go.
So it was certainly more a conscious choice then, right? A lot of people fall into sales, but yours was a conscious choice. I don't know the percent, but I'm going to guess it's 95% plus of people that will listen to this will know SaaS Outreach really easy. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but I can imagine when you're at Nordstrom, thinking about Outreach, SaaS, SDR, that must have been just like gobbledygook, absolute no understanding or appreciation for that world and that role. That must have been quite daunting to go from that to that.
Yeah, I think that's super fair. And this is also why I'm like SDRs Anonymous community and like why I'm so passionate about mentoring and coaching people at that beginning stage is because you're not educated on it and you don't know the opportunity, or at least I didn't know what the opportunities would have been for me within a sales career. So it was extremely daunting because it felt like I was walking in blind. Thankfully, I did have a friend, Justin Wright, who was able to like give me some insight. And I did a fair bit of due diligence, kind of like testing it out, going through the interview process. But it was a little bit of that. I mean, earlier, right? I told you I'm either 0% or 150%. So it was a little bit like, all right, if I'm going to commit to this, like I've got to jump in and go at it full force.
And talk to me about that then. You get offered the job at Outreach, you're chatting to your parents. They're just the way you describe them, and it's a very high level description, but I hear that a lot from people where they've got a parent, obviously a different generation, right? But when you start talking to them about SDR, they're like, what the hell does that mean? SaaS, what does that mean? Who's this company Outreach? They've grown really fast. I'm leaving this company that you know and an industry that you know I want to be part of, and I'm taking that role. How much did they sort of doubt the move and you moving into sales where you're going to be making cold calls and emailing people, trying to book meetings? Like, what did they make of that for their 25-year-old daughter at the time?
I think the biggest thing was like I think my dad was just nervous that I was making maybe like an irrational decision or a quick decision without thinking things already all the way through with the opportunities I had at Nordstrom. So I think that was what it is. He always believed in me and trusted that I would be able to figure it out, and he was confident that I would like have that skill set to do it. But yeah, he didn't really understand. He didn't know what I was selling, but to be fair, he owns his own business. And so like if I think back to it, like my first cold calls were when I was calling down his customer list selling these certifications and lessons for his industry that they would host at the training center. So he understands the need for pipe gen and the relationships and stuff, but it's just a different way of going about it, I think.
So that was interesting. Did you used to make those calls on behalf of his company?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, because, I'm a fashion girly and I wanted my designer bags, and he's like, "I'm not buying you any of that at that age." So, he gave me the opportunity to basically sell these courses or certifications, and then I got paid a commission on every single one. So I would literally figure out the bag that I wanted, work backwards of how many classes I need to sell, then go get the bag. So that's kind of, yeah, when I think about the first cold call that I made. So I think ironically, I was doing the selling before I even knew I was doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and lots of people, when they have that realization, they realize that they've been selling their whole lives. And
Yeah.
we can't not talk about that then. So what was that like? Not only is your boss your dad,
Yeah.
you're 15, 16, you say, you're picking up the phone. That must have been scary as hell.
On it, yeah. I mean, I wasn't that scared. I think there's something about being that young and being a little bit naive of going into it. So yeah, I can picture, I had literally like a pack of papers with the list. I'd go through with my highlighter of the ones that I've already called and just continue to work my way down it. And yeah, then would just say like, "Hey, your guys' certifications are coming up. Like, we've got a course that's launching on May 18th. Would love to get you in. It's $350." And then see how many people they needed to sell, or not sell, but sign up for it. And then I would get them signed up for it.
And did you have a script? Did you create one yourself? Did anyone sort of train you in what to do? Or
Not really trained, but it wasn't rocket science either. Like, if I knew what the course was and the certification, and they were running on a quarterly basis, then I knew I just had to call the list. And if you can read the person's name, then I would just pitch what the course was. And there's like a little description.
so help me understand the gap here. With 15, 16, and I get that when you're younger, you maybe have just, you don't have that self-limiting belief. You are more confident. You've got less, I suppose, attached to the outcome. But you get to a point where outreach is floated and you're like, no way, I'm not cold calling. I'm scared as hell. Where's the disconnect between that Kaitlen at 25 and Kaitlen at 15 and 16? Is like, give me the list. I'll call them up. I'll make the money.
Yeah, I think what I was envisioning, probably because is because it's like family run business. It's been running for 30 years. A lot of these companies know my dad's business. And so maybe it's that it felt more familiar to me. Whereas Caitlin at 25, 26, it was me walking into a tech company selling B2B tech and speaking to VPs. And I guess it's just a different persona. And now that I have the experience that I do know, I can kind of frame it that way. Whereas when I'm 15, 16 years old, I'm just calling like the owners of these companies that are like my dad that I would talk to every day.
And,
So
and I
maybe
know,
it
I
was.
know you'll know this, but so much of that just comes down to mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's channeling the right mindset and making sure that really you're aligned to what it is you're trying to do rather than who it is you're calling. Um, so we join Outreach, and unless I've got this wrong, it was like promoted within 4 months, promoted 8 months later, promoted 8 months later again. How did you
Mhm.
make it look so easy?
I wouldn't say I made it easy, but I think given I had the previous leadership experience that I did have and my analyst background, I think I had a lot of skills that allowed me to set up processes when I did jump into that role so I could stay organized and execute efficiently. So I think that kind of like when I think about when I first came into the SDR role, I was like heads down. I have a photographic memory. So I like wrote that script out like so many different times. I would cold call my parents to practice my pitch. And I was just like all in until I had it perfected. And I think I always have that mindset whenever I start a new role. I always go in knowing like, okay, the 6 months is going to be like heads down, absorb, absorb, absorb. And so when I went in and did that and started getting momentum and rhythm, I also had like great peers around me and some coaches that were just like super motivated and inspiring to be around as well. So kind of from there, and then my leadership background that I had, I think set me up nicely as a candidate essentially to lead and build out the team here in EMEA.
So there's two things I want to talk about there.
Yeah.
One is the peers and coaching that you had. Naturally, I'm curious about that. But Christ, cold calling your parents for role play. It's amazing. I love that. I reckon if you said to 99% of sales reps, we're going to role play, let alone with your parents, they'd run for the hills. How did you cope with that? It feels like it was fine. The way you described it was just like, it was no problem at all. Just calling my mum and dad up. But talk to me about the mindset that you need to have to be able to do that and why that was so helpful.
I think it's the drive that's within me. I'm also extremely competitive. So one of the things that I loved about Outreach is when they hire you on as part of a class, an Agogi class. And me being extremely competitive means that I have peers that start at the same time as me. So if I'm not booking more meetings and beating them on the leaderboard, then that's probably not going to be good enough. So I was doing everything I could to get better because these gentlemen that I was hired with were extremely great as well. And so that was something that I would do in my spare time. I would listen back to tons of gong calls. And I still do this as a leader as well. If I when I started at Klaviyo, I would just on my way to work, at the gym, I'm constantly listening so that I can pick up the product knowledge as quick as I need to be. But so in my spare time, if I'd be at home in the evening, call my parents. I would, hey, it's Kaitlen from Outreach on a recorded line, and I would just go straight into the pitch. They'd be like, Kaitlen, but yeah, and I would just keep going through and doing it. So,
do they give you feedback?
No, not really. So it depends on how far they'd let me take it before they'd give up on it. But it was more so just getting in the rhythm, and the more I kept doing it, the more natural it would feel. And I'm definitely, I would say the sales culture at Outreach was extremely call heavy. So, and we were out on the floor too. So I had mentioned some of my peers, we would gamify and make these call blitzes extremely fun and competitive. So I think that also kind of broke down some of the barriers of have the fear of the phone.
It's fascinating that we don't need to dive into it, but I'm a massive advocate for cold calling. It's really the only way I book pipeline for myself. And not to sound terrible, but if you want to book a meeting with me, it's really the only way that gets through to me. If you've got me on the phone, you've got my attention. I'm getting emails, it's harder. But my point is, Outreach, a tool that sped up the amount of emails, the delivery, the cadence, the sequences, whatever you want to call it, being call heavy. It's interesting that, isn't it? You'd feel like they'd be sequence and cadence heavy, but as I say, I'm a massive advocate for cold calling. It's just, that was interesting you said that. So talk to me about day one, you're part of a group. You're in a classroom, are you, I suppose? Yeah. How many people are you sat with in this cohort on day one at Outreach?
So when I started at Outreach, the cohorts were a little bit smaller. So it was 3 of us. So me, and then 2 other gentlemen. And, but then as it started growing and I became one of the team leads and managers, those cohorts started to grow bigger. So oftentimes we would be in, rooms with up to 8 new SDRs. But yeah, so it was quite intimate. And then it got to be to a point where it was getting bigger. When
you were sat there with the other 2 gentlemen, where did you rank yourself? First impressions, how did you rank yourself versus the other 2?
I would in reflection, I would say probably in the middle of, yeah.
Okay. So you thought one was better than you, one had the being of.
One had more experience. He'd been doing it before. He was familiar with it. Another one came from kind of a different background like I did. So I think kind of what separated me and maybe gave me that nudge for me to feel a little bit more confident in my abilities was my resilience.
Okay. Oh. And then I love how you've described I'm either out or I'm all in. And then just listening to what you said there, listening to call recordings on the way to the gym in the morning, as soon as I can, role playing with my parents, great peers, great coaches. Talk to me more about that. The first 6 months where you're this is a critical period. Almost give me your blueprint. So imagine a sales rep is listening to this, going to join a business in a SaaS role. This is the Kaitlen Kelly blueprint for your first 6 months. Everything you need to do to get ahead. What does that blueprint look like?
Nice. Yeah, so this is just going to be kind of like off the cuff of what I would do. But if I'm getting my first role as an SDR BDR and joining a company, I would, yeah, in my first 6 months, I'm going to basically execute on the onboarding or boot camp that they give to me. That's probably going to take up about 2 weeks or so. During that 2 weeks, when they are throwing tons of product knowledge at me and all the information I need, at that same time, I'm probably going to set up coffee chats with basically like key personas I know that are going to help me within my role. So then I'm building like a little bit of a resource pool behind me of people that I can lean on when I may need them. So that could be other peers, that could be top performing account executives, maybe it's other sales leaders, but it's trying to understand the different facets of the entire organization and where my impact is going to drive. So I'll be having coffee chats with different people, trying to understand their roles, what they love about their roles, challenges they're currently facing. And if it's something that I'm going to like as an SDR BDR, you're probably booking meetings for AEs. So try to understand any challenges or friction that is happening that you can help solve for. At the same time, I'm doing role plays. I don't know why that came out so weird, but I'm doing tons of role plays. I'm asking for feedback. I'm listening to the gong calls. I'm listening back to my own cold calls and checking the leaderboard to see where am I stacking up against my peers. So I think like it's going to be heavy on listening back and absorbing probably in those first 3 months and making sure that you're kind of practicing. And then that 3 to 6 month mark, you should have a pretty strong foundation of like scripts, objection handling, that omni-channel approach. So like LinkedIn, social selling, I'm referring to video as well, voice notes, and then phone and email, and have a good grasp of the ICP. And then from that 3 to 6 months, it's how do you like double down on where your strengths are to drive your results forward. You're probably going to start tiering out your accounts or heat mapping them so that you know, okay, which ones are likely to convert. This guy gave me an objection last week. Do I follow up with him this week? And how do you start to build kind of a process around that?
That's the blueprint to success.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, and I know you're taking the right way. Nothing you've said there is like revolutionary, right? But it's all the right things to do. But here's my point: loads of people say that, but so few do it. And it does that surprise you?
I mean, I don't think it surprises me because I see it all the time. I think what does, yeah, it surprises me that more people don't do it, especially if you're given a framework or a process. I think, I mean, organization, if you can be organized, then you're going to be miles ahead because you can execute on a plan efficiently.
Mm.
And so that is something that I would say I'm extremely good at and doing. And that's why I can execute like that. But I think you're just leaving opportunity on the table if you don't, and you're wasting your own energy and actual brain space too by trying to do that if you don't get yourself organized.
I think that is just on the money, a pool of money, so to speak. If you've seen the quick fire round, you'll get the reference. So when I think back to reps that I've managed over the last 8 years or so, one of the things that would frustrate me, and I see different between the top performers and those that aren't, right, is they've got just big holes in their calendar. And I think when you look at your calendar, that tells me if someone has got their shit together or not. And I'm guessing, therefore, you meticulously planned your day and your time and where you spent it. And so few reps do that. Like, I don't want to talk about SDR specifically here, but that would be a great example where you look in their calendar and you might literally see town hall on a Wednesday and that's it, nothing else. And it puzzles me.
Yeah, this is something I speak to as well as like time prioritization, but then it's also just time blocking out. And then as one thing I do with my calendar is I also color code it. So as an SDR, I would time block specific tasks that I need to execute on. And then on top of executing on those tasks, I would attach a goal to it. So if I knew I had to reach a goal by the certain time at the end of the week, or maybe I wasn't pacing because I don't know about you, but I've had one of those months where you're towards the end of the month and you're pretty far off that target and you've got like 5 days to figure it out and you panic. So you're like, how do I figure this out? The answer to that was I literally sat in a room and cold call till I got the meetings booked in. But working backwards from what the end goal is and setting goals against the calendar blocking is like key. And I carry that through even as a leader today on all the little tasks. That way nothing drops. Like I can't drop the ball on anything.
Absolutely. We speak the same language. I think we could compare calendars
Yeah.
and we'd complement each other. Mine's color coded, time blocked. I've got a goal set to it, and sort of what I sort of teach people to do as well, and coach people to do. Okay, so when I asked you at the start of the podcast, I said, "Did you used to be crap at sales?" You said yes. Was there a specific moment in your career that rushed to the front of your mind when you answered that question?
Yeah, there's one big one in like tech sales, and then there's one that just actually came to my mind as well. So do you want me to share both of them?
Love that.
Okay, so my first day as an intern on the sales floor at Nordstrom, I was terrified. I'm actually like an introverted person. I have to force myself to go to these networking events and kind of get out there to talk to people. And it's a skill that I had to develop. But to the point that like my shoulders and my arms will literally go numb because I'm so nervous. So when it's my first day on the sales floor, I don't even know how to approach a person. And I just remember my manager coming up and like literally pushing me on the back, like, you're gonna be fine. Just go say hi and ask how their day is. So that is something where I'm just like almost like the fear of talking to somebody or the fear of what the rejection maybe held me back there a little bit until someone else kind of pushed me forward and kind of believed in me before I believed in myself. So that was kind of in the fashion industry. And then software, yes. So at Outreach, made the transition over B2B. I'm cold calling. I'm like 4 months in, and I'm pretty fearless on the phone. So I'm like doing the phone thing. That's great. Got my script memorized. We're good to go. They sent me to my first event in Vegas. And the way that we do these events, it's incredible because there's so much prep work that I put into this. So I would like map out the entire showroom floor, understand all the brands that would have their booths there. And then I would research each of the brands and understand which ones were prospects, which ones were potential customers. And then from the ones that were prospects, I would then figure out who were with my personas. I'd map all this out. So I had a pretty like bulletproof plan of who I was going to target once I got there. And so, for example, it could look like, all right, I'm going to booth 318 because X company is there. And I know Jeff, the CMO, will be there after lunch. So I go and I'm with my account executive that I'm paired with at that time. And the way that the kind of the play works is we go up to the booth, we start chatting, trying to understand their play. And then I'd easily tee up a conversation for the account executive. This was my first event and my first time going to the booth in person. And I walk up, my persona's there because I looked on his LinkedIn. I know what his picture looks like. And I go straight up to him and literally pitch a script, a cold call script at him. So I mentioned my photographic memory, and it was the weirdest thing. It was like I turned into a robot and I just threw up this script at him. It was so not natural, so not human. And I think it shocked the account executive because he had to stop me halfway through and was like, I'm so sorry. We're gonna just take a step away from here. Like, we'll come back in a little bit. I apologize for this. And he had to like pull me away from the prospect and was like, are you still breathing? Like, what's going on here? So that is, yeah, a moment where I'm just like, that was incredibly embarrassing, Mark.
So, Kaitlen, let's just play that back. You again, meticulous planning is what's coming through here. So many people again don't do that with events, but I love it, right? So you know exactly, almost like the Terminator. You've got your list of people that you're going to find. You go up to the booth, you're with the AE, you see the person you want to speak to, you start to pitch like a robot.
Yeah.
Your AE shuts you down almost like halfway through, says to your prospect, I'm so sorry, we're going to step away and we'll come back. What was going through your mind when you heard that? That must have been crushing.
I think I would say I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, like I think I'm malfunctioning. Like, what just happened? So yeah, I wouldn't say it was like, I think it both shocked us. And then I wouldn't say it was like I didn't feel like I let him down. Like it didn't seem like he was extremely, I think he was shocked. more so than like let down or disappointed. And then for me, I think it was like a huge eye opener where maybe I was like over complicating it and just needed, it's like, calm down. Like, it doesn't matter if this is a CMO, like, it's just a person, just have a normal conversation. So I think that was kind of how we took it back and we just kind of simplified it again. It was like, you're human, like, just have a conversation. And I think one other thing that we did was just, which is probably simple, but I thought it was helpful, was just like role played like a couple ways to open up a conversation with somebody. So that was nice.
So, and you're totally right. It's just another human being. You can almost make light heart of the moment, and almost people are happy to forgive and move on. But yeah, so you go away from the stand. It feels like the AE is an absolute friend there in terms of just trying to help you.
Yeah.
Lots of people wouldn't have gone back to that CMO. Lots of people would have gone, you can go. I'm not going back, or we don't go at all. How easy was it for you to go back for a second round?
Yeah, so it took a couple I would say like a couple hours later, like we went into other booths before we circle back. And when we did circle back, it was definitely like a falling on my sword moment where I was like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. This is actually my first event. I didn't mean to just like show up and pitch at you, but I am curious to hear how you guys are handling your leads essentially." So,
I think that is just you played that absolutely right there. Almost like threw yourself under the bus. It's my first event. Natural reaction is to want to help you and give you that shot of redemption, so to speak. Did they buy?
I don't think so. No. Yeah.
Can you remember that? You don't need to name it. Can you remember who that person was?
I can like the outline of the person. I can't remember their name or the company, but I
Right.
have like, the vision.
Yeah. I wonder if somewhere else they sometimes tell the story. Oh, you know that great Kaitlen Kelly you see on LinkedIn. Let me tell you about her first event.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so let's talk about other things that you were crap at, because there's so many facets that even you've mentioned there as an SDR. It feels like you had that fear of cold calling, but 4 months in, your words there, no fear, crushing it on the phone. What other aspects of the role would you say you were crap at?
I would I mean, I've never been like the best at like the written words, like emails and stuff, but I think that was one of the benefits of outreach was the we had so many sequences and templates and stuff. So I think when I first actually this is good. So yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of the email prospecting, probably why I leaned in so heavy on the phone. If I reflect back on too, what made me so crap at that, I don't think I put enough energy into the relevancy of what that first nugget was. I never had an issue finding like a way to personalize it or, a reason to reach out to somebody, but like, how did I tie that back to my solution of like, why them, why now? That was, that was a learning curve that came later.
Do you think, and I'm guessing, do you think part of that might be down to your personality? Like you're all in or you're not, and if your belief is I'm not very good at email or don't enjoy email, I get great success from cold calling, maybe the email didn't get that 150% of you, so to speak. Do you think that was a part of it?
Um, I mean, I think that could have played into it. I think the true driver behind it was down to like speed and efficiency. And so if I think back to like what that template was, it's like that first line is like basically fill in your nugget, and then there's like a templated pitch. And this was I don't remember, maybe 5 years ago, right? Whereas I definitely think the frame of a cold email is different now. But so I think it was more of speed of efficiency where maybe I was just trying to get out as many sequences as possible. So I would just chuck the nugget in there for that first line rather than taking the extra minute or two to tie it all the way through.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you mentioned coaches. So it feels like you've had people that have walked in your shoes before, had success in that role that you can lean on. Talk to me about some of the coaches that you've worked with and that have helped you and more about that.
Yeah. So I think like coming in at outreach for that SDR role, like Ken Amar was the one that kind of led that entire Goji tribe. So a Goji is the new hires for their first 3 months. And that's to make sure that you have that strong foundation of how to execute on the job. So Ken was one of the top performers as an SDR there, and he also learned through Sam Nelson. So it was like this funnel of learnings all the way through. And so, yeah, so that was like kind of having that coaching and that level of like drive behind you. Like, I think one thing Ken does well is he believes in the reps that he would bring on board, and that even before you would believe in yourself. And so you would just kind of push through those awkward moments. Whereas sometimes it's easy to want to quit and give up, right? Especially if you're not getting the results. But he would continue to push you through. So I think earlier days, that was fantastic to see. Me and him ended up becoming peers and were highly competitive against each other, which was also incredible. Um, and then from there, like when I made the transition over to the EMEA team over here in London, like being able to work under Tom Castley, I think that was probably like an inflection point in my career because the amount of development and growth that I got underneath him also was incredible. And that helped me form a lot of the processes that I implemented within growing out that region, but also what I've been able to carry over to Klaviyo to do the similar thing within the account executive org.
And it feels one of the things that I think you've said 3 times now is this: believe in you before you believe in yourself. Like you mentioned about your parents, you mentioned that at Nordstrom, you've mentioned that there with your coach at Outreach. How important is that, do you think, for you, that you've had someone believe in you before maybe you believed in yourself and the journey of the career that you've been on?
Mark, you have incredible active listening, so that you picked up on that. How I think it is extremely important, and even like thinking back as a leader too, it's like how do you identify that in your reps as well, so that you can pull that out in them. So I think that's something that I'm always keeping top of mind because I think if a lot of people didn't tap me on the shoulders in some of these moments, I wouldn't be in the roles that I am in now, and I also wouldn't have that level of confidence that I was able to build up by the giving these opportunities that I went for and failed and then tried again and tried again. So I think with having people believe in you before you believe in yourself, it does create that environment where I can fail fast and be okay failing, not be afraid of it. That makes sense.
Total sense.
Yeah.
How do you do that with the backdrop of, like, so you've worked at Outreach and Klaviyo, to like darlings in the SaaS world where pressure will be high, right? Results will be needed and demanded. How do you create an environment where people, I know we've jumped now to you as a leader and we'll come back, but how do you create an environment where people can feel safe to fail, know that they're going to learn, with the backdrop of growth, investment, got to have the results? How do you do that as a leader? That must be really challenging.
So I think if I'm thinking about how do I create an environment where it's like safe to fail, I think there's a couple things that I would do, and I can kind of like talk through how I coach my team as well. But there's a metric or a matrix that I use called, it's Juicy 17, but Juicy is just the name of my team. But 17 is the key here. The idea here is looking at frequencies and competency. So giving my team a clear outline of what the expectation of the role is and metrics they need to achieve that will then result to them hitting their target or the metrics that they're held accountable for. So frequencies would be like KPIs and metrics that I can quantify. Competencies are going to be the soft skills. And with a mixture of those mixed together, so if you're hitting all of your frequencies and you're mastering your competencies, those will drive your results that we're tracking to be successful. So that could be your quota, your ASP, and your win rate, top 3 off the top of my head. So I think that helps create a environment where we know that we're growing and developing because we do that month over month reflection there. And that also tees up a great conversation for me to have with them, is like, talk to me about your strategy. What are we doing here? How can we pivot? Because I see it as like a massive partnership. And then the other thing that I'm doing to create that safe to fail environment is I vocalize my failures and I'm not afraid to get in the weeds with them. So like I'm happy to do cold calling with them. I'll jump on discoveries. I'll get involved in negotiations, but I want them to feel like we are at the same level and I'm here to support them so they can reach their goals. I never want it to feel like that top down approach. And I think if I can create an environment where it's like, we win together, that creates a safe space. And I think if somebody does fail, it's like, all right, what did we learn off the back of it? Let's take that, move it forward.
I love that. You sound like you'd be an incredible person to work with in a managerial capacity, the way you describe that. Talk to me about how you got into that manager role then. So we're an SDR. As I say, where are my notes here? We were promoted 4 months, then 8 months, then 8 months later. Did you just take this like a duck to water? Like once you got your first 6 months under your belt, you knew what you were doing. Was it just easy peasy for you?
So my first leadership role was at 23 years old with Nordstrom as an assistant manager for a division. And the route with Nordstrom is you go intern and then from intern to assistant manager. And then you either go to a bigger division or to a manager of a smaller division. So I was on that track in leadership. And then at 24, I believe, I was running the third largest trend division in the US. And I had 27 associates underneath me. So when I made the switch into the analyst office and then over to outreach, I had already, I'll say, crash and burned throughout my leadership career, to be honest. And I had some tough learnings earlier on because you can imagine being a 23-year-old trying to lead a 40-year-old that's maybe working part-time as a stylist. That's a hard dynamic to master. So when I got into outreach and started out as an IC, as an SDR, it really was like the first 3 months in, I started hitting really good results. And then I started breaking records. And right around that like 4 to 6 month mark, there was conversations of, where did I want to get back into management? And, or did I want to go account executive route? And to be honest with you, based off my previous leadership experience at Nordstrom, I was like, I don't want to do that because I just don't think I had the best experience. And so that wasn't my natural route to go that direction. And then some other people talked to me and I kind of thought it through a little bit more. And then that's when I started leaning in and training on the boot camps as a senior SDR. And then the opportunity for London came up. And I remember I got the call as I was moving into a new apartment in Seattle. And my mom was with me at the time. And they were just like, hey, we just want to float this idea by you. Do you want to take some time to think it over? It was in September of 2019. And I just committed on the call. I remember my mom looking at me like I was crazy. And she's like, you're just going to up and move to another country. And I'm like, it's only 6 months. Here we are.
It's amazing though. Like so many people don't get that opportunity, or if they do, they don't take that. As a father myself, I'd be like, right, well, I'm coming with you. I might struggle now. I've got two actually because they could be in different places. But let's talk more about you being a leader then. You've obviously had different experiences in and out of SaaS. Let's just go with a big question straight away. What's the biggest mistake you've made as a leader?
I think the biggest mistake I've made as a leader, I think it's like not taking the time to understand the why behind some things. So like if something's not working, and this is, I think I've learned off the back of it, but I think if something isn't working out, it's not taking the time to pause and maybe ask the rep why or help me understand. I'd come in and try to diagnose before trying to understand it. So I'd say that's like one of the biggest ones. I think the other one is coming to like a change management where it's like, okay, if you're trying to implement change, I'm good at implementing the change. And I noticed a trend where I would not have like the accountability bit, right? So it's like, okay, I'm doing all these efforts for changing, we're identifying it, but there was a gap on getting the results on the end. And that had to do with the program that followed up to kind of enable or like double down on the skill or whatever we were trying to train on. So I think those are kind of the two biggest ones, was like slowing down to understand the why to get the full picture before diagnosing, and then ensuring that there was a program with accountability when trying to implement change.
And how did you learn that? Was this, you learn it by yourself, or did you have someone to help you?
No, I think, well, there was a stark moment when I was 23 that happened at Nordstrom where it glares at me when I'm like, okay, pause and like understand the behavior. Understand there's something behind what's driving someone's behavior, typically is what I would say. So there was one of those moments that had happened where I had like one of my sales associates on the sales floor like snap at me, and that like shocked me. So that was like a moment where I learned, I'd say, the hard way. And then for the other one where it was like the accountability bit, I think this was working in tandem with Steve Ross, who is the VP of the SDR org at Outreach. And it's through having like talking through some of the things that I was implementing and my processes and stuff. And then it was the way he followed up with me on accountability. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, this isn't working. And so in reflection, then it came about where I'm like, okay, he's running this process with me. Why am I not replicating that with my team? There's a gap.
Can't ignore the word a stark moment. And I know you saw me bite my tongue. I've got to ask, when they snapped you, what did they say?
Why are you being such a bitch? I was like, oh my gosh. And it was like down to literally closing duties, which if we want to like, make that a synonym for like SaaS, it's like basically asking someone to do their KPIs at the end of their shift. So yeah, so it was taking this, like understanding like, okay, what's actually going on with this person? How can I take a step back and be kind of have a little bit of that empathy to show through? Because there's something else that's triggering this. Because it's not like these closing duties were new or something implemented on that day. And she'd been with the company for months. So there's something else that I needed to figure out. So that was the moment that like shook me, because I think that would shake anyone.
Yeah. And you're 23 at the time, you say?
Yeah.
How old's this person?
She was 19, so she was young.
Okay. I think that's important context, because you've obviously
Yeah.
mentioned like managing 40-year-olds, for example. So
Yeah.
they're young, they're emotional, etc. But they said, why are you being such a bitch in front of other people?
No.
Okay, just privately.
Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
How did you deal with that? Because that's not acceptable. How
Yeah.
did you deal with that?
I just like looked at her and walked away. And then I went to my manager to let him to loop him on the conversation to get support on how do I handle this in that context. Cause at that, I'd never been exposed to that. And I didn't know at the time how to approach a conversation without elevating it or making it bigger than it needed to be. It needed to be kind of diffused at that time. So yeah, I went to the store manager and then HR to figure out a path forward.
How did you have the maturity not to go back at them straight away?
I mean, I think at 23, I mean, yeah, I think at 23, that would have been really immature of me. And like, I don't know. I think to me, if I'm thinking about it, it's like, what is the outcome that I would have wanted if I would have reciprocated or if I would have went back? Like, I don't think anything good would have came of that situation, given where the emotion was at and the tone that she had used. So it was just completely inappropriate in my eyes. So at that point, I'm like, I'm going to walk away from the situation and then go figure out how to properly handle this.
I think you were more mature at the age of 23 than I was.
Yeah.
um, Obviously, sales leadership can be quite a lonely place. You're a sales leader now. Who do you turn to when you're having those difficult months, quarters, moments, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all the things that affect all of us, really? But who do you turn to now for help and guidance?
Yeah, I think that so I'm very lucky because we have a strong like sales manager group at Klaviyo. So I have a lot of like great relationships within the team so I can lean on and kind of vet out different challenges that I may be facing. I also think beyond just my internal team at Klaviyo, it's partnering with my wider network. So when I first moved to London, I think another thing that's interesting is I didn't know anyone in London. I literally moved out here for outreach. And so I had to create my own communities. And so this also ties back to SDRs Anonymous and how this kind of kicked off the ground because I knew the value of being able to network, bounce ideas off of other people. But from being able to do that, I joined the sales development leaders group. And then from there, we kind of spun out into a group of like 5 of us. And so that also helped me when I was just becoming a leader within the SaaS at Outreach. And so now I have a lot of people that I can kind of like lean on, bounce ideas with, which is like extremely helpful because it's good just to get viewpoints from outside of your org, but also internally as well.
And that makes a lot of sense. Talking about SDRs Anonymous, let's just imagine I've never heard of it, and people listening to this might not have heard of it. What is it?
I mean, they may have not. It's been on hold for the last 3 quarters. But SDRs Anonymous is a community that me and Shifa Neri, who was one of the first account executives at SIA, started up at the very beginning of the pandemic. So at the beginning of the pandemic, both of us recognized like there's going to be that stark shift to a remote environment. And one of the benefits of being in an in-office culture, especially within SDR and BDR land, was being able to have your peers to lean on when you do fail or something completely awkward or cringy happens on a cold call. You want somebody next to you that you can laugh about with it, but also just learning quickly from them and like how do you handle things. So it started off as a Friday chat where it was just like an open Zoom to anyone that was located within the London area. It was multiple companies that would jump on, and we would do like spitfire round questions as well. So we had a Slido that was set up and people would just type in questions anonymously that we then would address as leaders.
Amazing. And how many people are in the community?
So there's just over 7,000 now. And what it turned into is it turned in from that Friday conversation, which ended up being quite a bit of an uplift into quarterly events and then sharing some like content and stuff. So now, as we're kind of going through like a refresh and a revamp, we will be rolling that back out again into hopefully quarterly events again.
Amazing. How do people join? If they wanted to sign up and join, how do they do that?
It's literally just a LinkedIn community.
Right.
So easy. Yeah, just follow on LinkedIn, and then you just follow the content that we're posting. If we do events, all the events are linked through Eventbrite. They're in person. Some of them are on Zoom. So it's if we do a global one, it'd be on Zoom. But yeah.
Okay. I can tell just from some of the things that you said in our previous conversations, it's important for you to help people, to develop them, to coach them. What about yourself? It can be really easy to neglect yourself. Do you feel like you do enough personally to help yourself and develop yourself now?
I think this is a great question because it is definitely something that's top of mind. And if I think back to probably like my first, so being at Klaviyo for the last 2.5 years, I'll say actually I'll just simplify this rather than giving you a tangent. But I will set goals against what I want to achieve on my own professional development. So at one point in time, it was like, all right, once a quarter, I want to go get certified in a specific tool or a tech within the tech stack. So I did some outreach ones, I did some Gong certification ones. So it's like, how do I kind of build my skills in this way? Or I went through the Harvard program for leadership as well. So I'll set these little goals of where I identify my gaps are. And then there does become a time where all of a sudden a quarter goes by and you're like, oh my gosh, I just lost 3 months. What have I done to develop myself? Because things get busy, priorities get shifted. And if it's not top of mind, or if you don't schedule the time out on your calendar, then it can get put in the back seat. So it is something that I have to be proactive about. And to be transparent, yeah, in the last 2 quarters, I have been looking for a way to kind of stretch and develop myself and what is the direction that I want to be stretching and develop in. Trying to pin that down.
And do you have like someone outside of Klaviyo, like a mentor or a coach that you do work with currently?
Yeah, so there's like quite a few different mentors that I will like partner with, kind of like bounce ideas off of, which is like super helpful. So, and they're from different types of backgrounds as well, which I think is important too, so I can get different insights.
So I love that. I want you to talk to me about the impact that's had. One of the things that never fails to amaze me, I know you would have just seen this your whole career, is sales. So first of all, sales is a skill, right? Like when people say it's gift of the gab, etc., like it's nonsense. Sales is a skill that can be fine-tuned, it can be learned and eventually mastered, right? But there's no barrier to entry. Anyone can get a sales job at a certain level. Like anyone can get into sales. But there's an ego there. And I find lots of sales reps have no, I use the air quote for those listening, but qualification, so to speak, get into sales.
Yeah.
They have the ego, though, that they don't need coaching or mentoring. They're going to do this themselves. What would you say to people in sales right now that think they're too experienced, they're too good, they don't need a mentor, they don't need a coach, when they've got into a job that's got no barrier to entry and it is a skill that can be learned and fine-tuned? And let's be clear, the better you are, the more you earn. It always amazes me when you speak to people and they just look down on mentorship or coaching as beneath them. What do you make of that?
Um, I would want to understand why they feel like it's beneath them. Or I think, yeah, I think that is interesting. I think if I'm thinking to like my team and like why they don't maybe go out and get external mentors and coaches, it's obviously because I'm the best. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it comes down to like the time commitment. And I kind of view it as like, it's a small investment for a big gain. And this is also how I look at like podcasts, joining webinars, going to network events. Like, yeah, I may be giving up one night a month to go and network with someone, but I can walk away with one thing that I'm going to be able to use for the next 10 years. So I think it's kind of getting them to like understand that framework, that there is value. Maybe not all of it's going to be a value. Maybe you're not going to get everything from a mentor or a coach, but you may pick up just that one thing, or even just setting up a conversation with a peer that maybe is excelling in an area that you're not. I think taking that 30 minutes, yeah, maybe it's going to take 30 minutes away from prospecting or cold calling, but you might learn something that can make it so that you have more meetings on your calendar so you don't have to do that 30 minutes of prospecting.
How big do you think mentorship and coaching has been for you in your development?
Oh, I think it's huge. Like, I don't think that because I think it's like all of it. Even like from day one, I had a mentor. So within Outreach as an SDR, and it's just somebody like bounce ideas off, frustrations off, especially outside of your manager, who maybe you're nervous to bring some of these things forward to, especially if you're just starting out on a role because you don't want to like disappoint them or make them nervous if you're not grasping the ideas of something. So having like a mentor or even like a network around you is going to be like extremely valuable just to get that extra insight.
So, Kelly, you're obviously conscious of development and working with people, etc. What would you say is the biggest flaw in your game today that you're trying to work on?
Think what I'm trying to iron out right now is like we have this awesome opportunity at Klaviyo where we're launching additional products. And I've never worked for a company where I've been a part of that program where you're known for one product and then you have additional ones that you can attach on. So now we're trying to change that essential discovery and pitch to how do we sell it as a suite rather than just one piece of the puzzle. So when I'm thinking about and reflecting on what the training and the coaching looks like, I think one thing that we do really great is the training aspect. So the transfer of the information and all the data points, the skills, everything they need to know to sell it. But then there's the coaching aspect in the program that follows. So this is something that I've been fine tuning for this quarter. And it's okay. How do we then enable them and make sure that we're coaching them on it week after week so that it stays consistent and sticks? It doesn't just become something where we run a training and then it falls off. So it's how do I get the training here? And then what does the coaching program look like? And then what's the outcome I'm looking for so the team knows the North Star that we're working towards? So that's kind of the gap I'm filling right now.
And as a sales leader, you spin multiple plates, right? You'll be recruiting and onboarding, you'll be training and coaching, forecasting, one-to-ones, internal fires to put out, etc. How much time do you spend coaching the team, do you believe, on a weekly basis?
I would say if I was to look at my calendar, about probably 60% of it is going to go towards coaching. And then 20% of it is going to be like forecasting calls, pipe scrubs. But within that coaching, that's one on ones, that's call reviews, it's running trainings. There's all of that's going to go into it.
60% is amazing. Most people spend less than 5% of their time coaching. So that's incredible. What color is coaching in your calendar?
So let me take a look. Actually, I have my calendar off so it doesn't buzz on here. But it's going to be by different colors. So
Okay.
all of the one-to-ones are going to be purple. Coaching, like if it's going to be like one of the team trainings, it'll be a dark green color. And then we have yellow, which is going to be like outreach deep dive. So so that's basically.
I always struggle when people use different colors for different things. Like my one-to-ones are blue, for example, and it would freak me out to change that. My discovery calls are green, my prep's yellow, and like
Okay.
I could not do it another way. Like it'd almost be like a non-negotiable. Someone said to me, "Here's a job, but your discovery calls have got to be red." I couldn't cope with that. Like I've got my colors and I've had them locked in for about 15 years.
I think that the reason why I color code all the ones that I control, and then all the meetings that are blue are like that other people are putting on my calendar, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Say you were to start your career again, what would you do differently?
I think I'd get into software sales sooner. I think that's like the one thing that kind of kills me is I wish I just knew about it sooner and the opportunities. And I made the switch at 27. And so I think just getting involved sooner would have been amazing.
What do you think would be different? Like, say you got involved 5 years earlier. What do you think would be different? Where would you be?
Um, I mean, I think I'd probably, yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I would probably be further within my career. Maybe I'd be at a VP level of a company at this point, but I still am developing some key skills here. So I think, yeah, I think if it, that would be one thing. And full transparency too is if I would have got in sooner, then that's like essentially 6 more years of making software sales type of money versus fashion money, which we're not going to go into the difference there, but you can imagine. So one thing that I like aspire to have is like a portfolio of like rental homes and houses. That's something that I'm working towards. So my investments, I think, would be in a different situation if we started a little bit earlier.
Yeah, the tech sales money probably allow you to buy the fashion items from the fashion world.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We'll start to wrap this up. Honestly, Kaitlen, I've just missed so many questions that I could ask you. What I am picking up though is that you're incredibly proud of the career that you've got, proud to be in sales, which I love to hear. And obviously the sad reality is lots of people fall into sales, don't want to be in sales and would love to get out of it. You told me before offline that you've got one nephew and two nieces, or a couple of nephews and one niece. What is it?
Yeah, 2 nephews and a niece.
Let's imagine, and I'm guessing they're obviously not at the right age for this decision, but
No.
they're in different careers and they pick up the phone to Auntie Kaitlen and they say, there's a SaaS company, it's an SDR role, I'm thinking about going for it. What would you say?
I would say go for it 100%. Yeah. I wouldn't I mean, I will support their honestly, I would support them in whatever they want to do. Want them to all three of them to like have the world. So, yeah, if they were to say that, I'd be like super excited about the fact that they want to go down that career track. And then I'd probably ask them a little bit more about it and just make sure that like the company that they are choosing maybe aligns with a passion or something that they can get internally involved with.
What's the one warning you'd give them? I.e., go for it, but what's the one thing that you'd warn them about?
I think it's important to look at, I know like culture is a huge thing, but I always look at like the leadership team that's there as well. And then the career progression. Because what I would hate to see is that they go into a company and then they don't get the best experience or they don't have the right development early on. And then all of a sudden they're turned off of sales because they don't think it's for them, or some people just don't have the great off the jump experience, which then puts a bad taste in their mouth. So that would be my one thing is like, hey, it's going to be really hard work but extremely rewarding. Make sure you do your due diligence throughout the interview process so you know exactly what kind of development and training you're going to get so that you are successful in your seat. That's what I'd say.
Fair enough. And again, I could ask 3 or 4 questions about that. Like, what would you ask them to do? How would you help them? But time has got the better of us.